Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. Big drama emerging today as big rumours were emerging yesterday that Loud are potentially breaking up after the World Championship. Aspas may well be out of there, and the question would be, if Aspas is gone, where would he potentially go next? Rumours were emerging yesterday that NRG are interested in Aspas, potentially to replace Ardis. NRG have now pretty much in their entirety come out and said, this is not true, this is not the case, but could it potentially be possible at some point in the future, depending on how things go at the World Championship, and also with other rosters like Sentinels potentially also interested? Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. Firstly, wanted to say that I'm sure there's a lot of weird feelings right now going on with DSG fans, because somehow they're actually winning things. And I don't understand exactly what's going on with the Guard as well to some degree, because the Guard, we thought a few months ago the Guard were fully shutting down and it was going to be game over. The organisation were out of there. Stan Kroenke decided that he'd had enough and he wanted to go and pull out of esports in its entirety. But here we are a few months later, and the Guard are still ploughing on, and they're still making great content here on Twitter, and they're actually allowing that disguised Game Changers roster plays from their kind of facility, right, to have a great time. And it's actually worked out really rather well. As Katarina says, top 3 guaranteed, 2-1 deck set, 2-0'd phase. This was this moment actually, so did I whiff on 3 people not looking at me? No, I have no idea what you're talking about. And this was the clip in question. It was actually pretty funny because Toast watched this and said, oh yeah, like, unlucky Katarina, your contract is now terminated. Like, it's been a pleasure having you play for the organisation. But she comes up behind 3 players and she misses all the shots and dies. But still, disguised Game Changers still, I think, won the round in the end. And yeah, they did. And they still won the map and series pretty damn comfortably. So impressive stuff, honestly, from DSG. And especially given all the shambles of DSG in Valorant, I wouldn't have been surprised if Toasted had said, you know what, like, I've had enough of this. Get me out of esports. Let's not do this again. DSG started so promisingly and then fell off massively. The Yay thing, it didn't work out. The team was a mess. There was all the drama, and that's now completely been put to bed, especially by the Game Changers team actually doing pretty well, which is good to see, and good to see Toast having a good time enjoying it, and actually the team performing. So they beat FaZe's Game Changers roster last night 2-0. This was that one we mentioned on the bind, that 13-3, and then Ascent was 13-10 before that, and that leaves the bracket like this. Version 1 are still the favourites. They come in with the best team theoretically here in the North American side, and you would expect that to continue, but who really knows? Losers bracket begins again today, so we've got FaZe Clan versus Shopify Rebellion, then Complexity versus EG, so that's what's going on down there, and then the grand finals on the 30th between, one of these 2 teams. Disguised Game Changers confirmed, top 3 at the bare minimum, so pretty cool stuff. But also we've got to talk about rostermania elsewhere. So Sentinels, after they bowed out of the LCQ, that was a big discussion, and it will continue to be, especially with the potential rift here between the Brazilians and the other players on the roster, as in, will Sassy Pancada go back to a Brazilian team? Will they go to Furia? That's been quite a big discussion lately that is possible. But also, could Sentinels even want to keep those and bring on another Brazilian potentially, and even go a different route, as in, is Aspas an option? He's good friends with Sassy, good friends with Pancada. The rumour was, we saw yesterday, was that as a trio might potentially form up somewhere, maybe on Furia. But, maybe Sentinels have a think about it, right? Depending on what they think that team could potentially do. So we saw yesterday, the big rumours were emerging. Rod/Breslau talked about this, that Aspas and the team at Loud have had some friction going on. He's apparently not there in Brazil with the team practicing. And Salak came out on Twitter and said that no, or x.com, whatever it's called nowadays. So he says, this is not happening. This is all clickbait. We're united and focused 100%. And maybe you guys believe that, but, if he was there, if Aspas was there with the team, practicing with them going into Champions, they could just take a selfie, just take a picture of him and the boys in the practice room, grinding it out, and then it would put all the rumours to bed. The fact that that Twitter picture doesn't exist probably says to me that, yeah, there might be some truth to this story, and we've seen on Loud's recent results and their collapse at Masters Tokyo that things aren't probably going swimmingly within that organization. And even Sean Gare said, yeah, their scrims aren't going well, and they've been playing with this other player, Havoc, rather than Aspas for now, which is definitely confusing if it's all sunshine and rainbows within that team. Now, this does not necessarily mean, though, of course, that Aspas is going to be going elsewhere immediately, and that Aspas is already in discussions with other teams. But that was the rumor that was emerging last night, especially from this source on Mace Esports. I'm not exactly sure, like, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong anyway, but I believe it's a Brazilian outlet that focuses primarily on League of Legends and Counter-Strike, but they've waded a little bit into the world of Valorant and done a report that everyone seems to say has no basis in reality. So we'll see plenty of the responses here from the NRG players in a second. But the report said that NRG are keen on signing Aspas for the upcoming 2024 season. Now, I believe this might be initiated because I think they showed some interest last year when they were getting artists. It was like, we're trying to get artists. If we can't get in, we'll get Aspas type thing. They got artists, so, you know, they locked him in. But, you know, I think that maybe Aspas was at least a consideration last year. And that's why that, again, maybe there's a link going on that probably doesn't really exist, to be honest. So this is the initial report that, you know, the article gets tweeted out, and we can see in the replies here, Chet already saying, very good fake news. Because I don't think that NRG at this point in the season would be at least entertaining these ideas. Especially, like, the players won't be thinking about this at all, I don't imagine. The coaching staff probably should be, just because you've got to be aware of the situation, and if Champions goes badly wrong, then if you know that Loud are potentially breaking up and Aspas is going to be on the market, and his contract, we believe, is at an end after this season of play, as soon as Champions is over, Aspas will be a free agent, quite possibly, then, you know, top organizations have to be aware of that. But will the players be already thinking, oh yeah, we're going to drop artists for Aspas? Like, I don't really see how that makes much sense. Now, just to be clear, when you translate this article from Portuguese, Aspas in Portuguese means something like quotes or quotation marks when it's literally translated. So anytime it says quotes, it really just means Aspas, but it gets translated, which is kind of funny, really. But according to sources close to Mace Esports, apparently NRG are going to join the fray to bring Aspas into the squad. Obviously, his contract ends at the end of this season, and the rumor is that Aspas didn't return to the country, and, you know, they reached out to NRG Loud. Sentinels didn't give any response to this, and also the source indicated that after the announcement of the franchise league, they were interested in hiring Aspas and Pancada, I'm guessing is what that's trying to say, to the team, but the conversations didn't advance, and Loud stayed with Aspas and Pancada went to Sentinels instead. Also, some rumours here that FNS and Crashies might team up again with Marved from Sentinels on NRG, which is definitely possible, but I don't know if they're really pulling that from anywhere at all. So anyway, and there was even some discussions linking Sentinels. I really don't know where they're getting this from, and it doesn't seem like anyone seems to believe that any of this is actually true as it stands. Not to say that NRG wouldn't or shouldn't have interest in a player like Aspas. I think you at least, when a player like Aspas is available, if he is to be, you've got to at least entertain the possibility. But whether you would pull the trigger on a move like this will depend massively on what happens at Champions to both Loud, who have a pretty difficult group, and NRG, who also have a pretty difficult group. I mean, Loud are in like the group of death down there, right? Group D, with, you know, all those very strong teams on paper. Liquid's down in there, Navi's down in there, and then Loud play DRX, of course, in their first round. So only 2 of those 4 teams get through. That's not going to be easy. NRG have, you know, theoretically a slightly easier time, but their group is still difficult, right? They've got, what is it, Fnatic and Zeta, and then they play BLG, I think, round 1. So that should be winnable, but then after that, it's not going to be easy. So, yeah, it all depends what happens at Champions. But for now, most people are saying, yeah, this is not true at all. Even George Geddes wades back onto the timeline to say, LOL, this is not happening, and says, like, do I come back for the offseason because this misinformation is crazy? So he says that it's not true. We obviously saw that tweet from FNS that says, why do we just lie about this, right? Like, why are we just making these things up? And, you know, it's weird that reports would just be completely fabricated. So they must feel like there's some reality behind this, you know, esports organization that's put this out. But when all the players, when it's like 1 player or 2 players that come in and says, no, it's not happening, but when like the entire team comes out and says, no, this is not true, then you've got to wonder a little bit. Chet says fake news. Victor replies with a question mark saying, like, what are you talking about? This is definitely not going to be happening. But yeah, look, the contract database says that he's under contract until the end of the year. So, seems to be a big assumption being made right now. But nonetheless, massive questions about that particular role this offseason, especially when we saw this from Ye the other day, going to Brazil and all this stuff. When you've got players like Artis, you've got players like Ye, you've got obviously Marv, obviously different role, but possibly in the conversation to go back to NRG, depending on what happens there and what Sentinels decide to do. But changes will be made by these teams. NRG will have to do pretty well, I would think, to stick out with the roster. They're one of the more likely organizations to stay with their roster, I think, going into next season, but it's still not for sure, especially if Aspas is available, and, organizations will be looking at his services. More than likely, as I say, he joins up with Sassy and Pancada and they go to Furia. That's like the current theory as to what they might do, and I think that's pretty likely, to be honest, and probably much more likely that they would go to NRG with a pretty interesting and strange setup. Just also from Leaf, he did tweet the other day that he was, just wants the year to be over, hopefully next year will be better, but then he quote tweets this and says it really can't get worse than this. So I don't know whether that is implying that Cloud9 have made an early call, because their team's done for the season, right? And it's quite possible that Cloud9 are making changes. They've already decided to drop certain players, remove certain players, and maybe Leaf is going to get caught up in a fair bit of that, right? But you would think that Cloud9 would move relatively quickly, as will the other teams, to be honest, that didn't make it to Champions. There's nothing else for them to do other than already make changes. And just before we close out here, I know that Thinking Man's VALORANT came in and made some interesting decisions as to where DRX are going to end up here, but still, these are the theoretical power rankings that the boys over at Platchet have put together. Fnatic #1 by a mile. After that, it's pretty difficult to say. Edward getting very highly rated here, Loud and DRX, Liquid, and then you get Crew getting to #9 out of nowhere, Giants, T1, Na'Vi, Zeta, and then, the majority outside of Foot of the, teams from the Chinese region. But Edward Gaming, of course, definitely going to be up there theoretically, but very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.